Welcome back, friends, to another edition of In the Trenches. And we want to let you know what's already out. You can go to MGO Blue Podcast. Obviously, find our family of podcasts there. Radio replay of Inside Michigan Football. My guests this week were Sharon Moore, wide receiver coach Ron Bellamy, and also wide receiver Donovan McCulley. Defend the Block, which is hosted by my partner here, Mr. Brian Bush. The guest was Matt Aldridge, the head strength and conditioning coach for the men's basketball program. Still to come this week, as you are listening to the recording of the 7 from 77. On the audio version, you will have Hudson Hollenbeck, the punt returner. We will also have a guest, or sorry, not the punt returner, punter. We will also have Tony Castricone joining us in just a few moments. But Conquering Heroes this week is the new gymnastics coach, women's gymnastics coach here at Michigan. That is Myliana Caneva-Hermelin. Just a couple of months on the job. They're going to get going here in just a few weeks. So we'll get a chance to sit down and talk to her. Thursday afternoon in the trenches, we'll be previewing the Washington matchup, which is a noon kick. It will also have the pregame speech on there as well. Friday afternoon, the game day edition of Inside Michigan Football, which you can find on the Michigan Athletics YouTube page. It will also be in the stadium just prior to the game. Saturday afternoon, after we take the Huskies to the woodshed, it will be in the trenches recapping that win against the Washington Huskies. Little prediction there. No surprise that we predict Michigan to win. But again, Washington, noon, big house, big-time showdown.
And a big weekend for you, John Jansen.
Oh,
Friday
yes,
night,
yes,
Hall of
Friday
Honor
night,
induction.
Yes.
Nervous, excited? What's going on?
I'm excited, and yes, I'm excited about the being inducted to the Hall of Honor, but I'm most excited that it is 3 hours of a date with my wife. No kids involved. So, yes, I am very excited to be out on the town Friday night.
There you go. Well, make sure you don't go too crazy because there is a pregame show you need to be on starting at 10 a.m. I have faith you'll still be at the tailgate at 6 a.m. All right, let's get into business at hand. Obviously, fun little intro there, but not a fun weekend for the Maize and Blue at USC over the weekend. Let's talk about it. Number one on our 7 from 77, just the biggest concerns you had. Let's start offensively. What worried you about what you saw in LA?
I think the biggest worry that I had was the inconsistent play of the offensive line. There were times where they'd line up and things looked as they should, whether it was protection or in the run game, and you'd rip off 5 or 6 yards. And it didn't matter if it was Jordan Marshall or Justice Haynes. Obviously, Justice goes down, Jordan goes in, and I didn't have any worry. I thought we would still be very productive, and at times we were. And even at times we were productive in the pass game when we gave Bryce enough time, but it was just inconsistent. And the inconsistencies came really with the linebacker play, not anticipating when you have a linebacker line up on the end of the line of scrimmage. Common sense and awareness tells me that I think the defensive line is going to slant across my face. We didn't see that. We didn't recognize it. We didn't block it. When a linebacker lines up in the B gap and you're in a 5-man protection, I've got to at least set to honor that blitzing linebacker. If he comes, he's more dangerous than my edge guy. That's just one example. It happened at the guard. It happened at the center position. It was just inconsistency. And at the O-line position, you have to have all 5 guys having success on every single play. One guy breaks down the entire play. So that's probably the biggest concern I had. There were plenty more, but that's the biggest.
How about defensively? Number 2 on our 7 from 77. USC racked up 489 total yards. What has to get cleaned up?
For me, it's more the concept of the defense. And I've talked about Wink and how I like some of the adjustments that they've made. But if you've got a quarterback, we saw it against Wisconsin, and we saw it again with Maeva for USC. If they're going to run shorter routes and that ball is going to be in and out of the hands of the quarterback, they put him in the shotgun. He doesn't even have to take a drop. He just sets his feet and that ball is gone. The pass rush is going to be ineffective. You've got to be able to do something on the edges. And maybe you're only going to rush 4. Maybe you're only going to rush 3 at times, but you should be able to flood that secondary and make it hard for him to find those guys that quickly, especially at the end of the game when you know, hey, we've got to make something happen. Having a 50-yard cushion on a wide receiver, to me, it doesn't make sense. And I know you're not going to do bump and run all the time, but you've got to be in a position to force them to hold on to the ball, force them to do something other than they've done all game. So it was more not a position group, but the concept and the calling of the defense.
So it's a big one for the Wolverines, looking to clean up that stuff coming up noon Saturday against Washington. And if you're coming out to Ann Arbor or later this season, we encourage you to check out more and explore more of the great city of Ann Arbor.
That's right, Brian. There is a lot to explore. You could stop at your favorite spot. Everyone has their favorite spot, but then maybe try something different. You could hit up downtown Social District, the Arboretum, the concert. There's plenty of them going on in downtown. There's a lot to do outside of Ann Arbor as well, like hiking the B2B Trail and golfing on some of the incredible golf courses. That's because the Ann Arbor area is seven destinations full of year-round fun and plenty of fans rooting for the Maize and Blue. You can't argue with those stats. Start planning your trip at annarbor.org.
So number 3 on our 7 from 77, I want to talk through what this team does well, what we know Michigan does well at this point, because it's going to be needed coming up on Saturday and obviously down the stretch this season. Michigan's in a must-win situation. So I know there are things that there is a potential for Michigan to be good at, and that's a pretty long list. But what are you confident that you know Michigan is above average, and not just that statistically or against anybody, but they're good to great in areas against teams that are good to great?
I would say, nothing great right now. So I'm going to take that descriptor out of there, but good linebacker play. And I know in talking to Sharon on Monday night, he talked about being, more efficient tacklers. That's one thing that needs to continue to be a staple of that linebacking group. But it honestly, for 95% of the time, it is. Ernest Hausman is a terrific open field tackler. Jimmy Rolder, same thing, and especially in approaching the line of scrimmage. But I think the linebacker play, when you put not Ernie, but Cole or Jayshawn Barham on the edge, rushing the passer, I think that's been a huge asset and good to great in regards to that. But teams are starting to figure that out in regards to, hey, well, let's show a passing formation. Let's go and show that personnel. Let's get both of those guys to rush upfield, then we'll use that vacated spot to run through. So there needs to be some adjustments, but the performance of the linebackers, I think, has been really good and will continue to be good against the better teams. And maybe against Washington, that I think they're a good team, certainly against Ohio State. The other where we have good talent, to great talent, is the running back position. Now, they're a lot reliant on the performance of the offensive line. We've seen when it all works well, explosive runs from both, Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes. That's been great. Justice has done a nice job, even when holes aren't there, of being able to set up the linebackers and make it cut backside, of being able to bounce the ball outside, just uses pure speed to be good. So the talent-wise, it's good talent, but it needs to be more consistency with that offensive line of being able to utilize that good talent in the backfield.
So number 4 on our 7 from 77, Michigan has talent. Washington's a very solid team. They might be a little bit ahead of schedule in year 2 of the Jed Fish kind of full rebuild post Kalen DeBoer after he left for Alabama. I'll ask you this. Is this a leadership game? Because we discussed last week, going into USC, that was a potential fork in the road where a win and Michigan was probably going to be favored fairly heavily through the rest of the regular season until Ohio State, which turned into a Big Ten championship play-in, turned into a college football playoff play, and all of that. That's not the case now, because a loss on Saturday, and Michigan's kind of in that toiling spot where maybe it turns into potential lost season territory if they don't get it done. So is this a leadership game for those players, those coaches, but in particular the captains?
It is, because what's at jeopardy? You outlined some of those things in regards to the Big Ten championship. That's already in jeopardy. But how do you get your teammates to be able to play at a high level, knowing that one of those goals may be out of your hands and may not be attainable? You still got to have great play, because what is still in your control? Rivalry games, and obviously playing in the big house, but also the college football playoffs. Even though it may be harder to do, if you win out and you beat Ohio State at the end of the year, you're 10-2. Most likely you're going to be in the college football playoffs. So to get there, you've got to find a way to beat Washington. And then you think about Michigan State, that takes care of itself that week. Purdue, Northwestern, Maryland. All of that will take care of itself, but it has to all begin and end with a game against Washington. So yeah, this is a captain game. You got to have leadership from Bryce, even though he's a freshman, but he's the one that's in command of this offense out there. You got to have other guys be able to step up when needed and when called upon, depending on what their role is, their position. But this is 100% from the time they landed, getting back from USC to the time they kick off. This is a captain game. You have to be disciplined. You have to be focused. You can't get distracted because maybe some of those goals are harder to reach. Maybe some of them are out of reach right now, but you've got to be able to focus.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what Sherrone Moore said to you on Monday night. Yeah, there's no doubt that Michigan's behind the 8 ball here, but weird stuff's happened in college football. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Control what you can control. Go 1-0 this week, and they're going to have to stack those. Against a Washington team that, again, 5-1, just knocked off Rutgers this past Friday night at home up in Seattle. What stands out? We'll get your keys to the game edition on the audio side on Thursday, but Damon Williams Jr., a fascinating young sophomore quarterback who's dynamic, just set a Washington record for most total rush and pass yards in a game, passing Michael Penix Jr. from a few years ago. Jonah Coleman, leader in the nation in rushing touchdowns, and Denzel Boston, he was on display fully against Rutgers. He's one of the best receivers in the country.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about an efficient offense. When you've got a quarterback like Damon Williams Jr., who in that last game against Rutgers throws the ball for 402 yards and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And then on the ground, it was 136 yards on just simply 13 attempts, along with another 2 touchdowns. He accounted for 4 touchdowns in that game. You look at the score and you think, I would have thought with over 530 yards by one guy that the score might have been in the 40s or the 50s. So, hey, hats off to Rutgers for keeping it sub 40. But that is a very explosive and efficient offense. And so when you think about the context of that game and that performance, and then you throw in there Jonah Coleman, who has 11 touchdowns on the ground, they're very good in the red zone. His yardage isn't up there with USC's running back or with Justice Haynes. But when you have that type of production, you're getting great production in the red zone. And so that has to take into account game planning this. And Denzel Boston. And for those who don't know, yes, he is David Boston's son. So there is that little bit of Buckeye connection. But he is a very explosive and can make acrobatic catches. He's a guy that you throw that 50-50 ball up there, he's going to go make a play on it, and more times than not, he comes down with it. So whether it's the quarterback, it's a receiver, and there's a couple other true freshmen that are playing really well for this Washington team at the receiver position. This is a very potent offense. So you're going to have your I's dotted, your T's crossed, and you're going to have to get some things fixed when you take into account what happened at USC, where a team basically did whatever they wanted on the ground, did whatever they wanted through the air.
It's interesting because there are a lot of similarities statistically and personnel-wise to what Michigan just encountered with USC's offense. Williams is pretty close to Jaden Maiava in terms of some of his numbers and better than Maiava in some. And how about this from Jonah Coleman? He has 15 carries of 10 or more yards of his 96. Justice Haynes has 15 of 10 or more in 95 carries. So just how good Justice Haynes has been, that's very similar to Jonah Coleman so far. Now, you mentioned the yardage from that game against Rutgers, John. Rutgers had 493 yards in that game and only scored 19 points. Feels like a bend but don't break. There's an opportunity for Michigan offensively against Washington's defense, but they have been able to at least buckle down in the red zone.
They have, and that's where Michigan has found some challenges. Michigan has done a nice job of putting together drives, getting into the red zone, but they've come up short and had to settle for 3 or attempts at 3. So Michigan has to figure out, can we use Marlon Klein? Can we use Hogan Hansen as weapons in the red zone where we can use their size advantage? Donovan McCulley, one of the touchdowns that he had was a red zone touchdown. But to even make that play possible, you had to have great protection. That was a 4 or 5 second play. You've got to be able to hold up in protection. They did on that moment. And if you do, hey, Donovan McCulley or Andrew Marsh, you're going to have the opportunity to complete some of those passes because they've struggled on the ground in the red zone. So that's where, it's a defense that you're going to be able to get some yardage on, but you've got to capitalize on those. And maybe it's just if Justice is healthy and available, being able to score from the 50-yard line and have those explosive plays. That's the one thing against USC Michigan didn't really have, save the one, in not inconsequential, but it didn't matter in the end, the 69-yard pass play to Andrew Marsh.
Yeah, Sherrone Moore, non-committal about the status of Justice Haynes, at least expressed some optimism. Yeah. Feels like it's a possibility. Feels like we're going to be talking about it up until the availability report and maybe after, coming up on Saturday. More with the Washington side of things. We'll have their play-by-play voice, Tony Castricone, joining us in about 15 minutes on the video side of the stream. But hey, we got everybody, audio, video. Y'all know what Crumble is. Crumble Cookie. It's delicious. It's a new partner on the podcast.
It is, and I'm disappointed that we don't have, since this is a visual medium, the actual ability to eat some of these Crumble.
Next time, Crumble, we'll get you.
Yes. Hey, if you're looking to make your day sweeter, especially game days, stop by Crumble today and enjoy a dessert. Crumble offers a weekly rotating menu with over 250 flavors. So you'll want to visit next week as well. Ordering your favorite Crumble dessert is easier than ever. Simply open the Crumble app and choose in-store pickup, delivery, or convenient curbside pickup. And the best part, all Crumble desserts are made fresh daily. So you can see, and I can witness this, smell as well them when you walk into the store. Try this week's desserts at Crumble Ann Arbor, located at North Maple and Jackson, or you can visit one of the many locations in Southeast Michigan.
And this week on that menu, red velvet cupcake cookie and a pumpkin square with brown sugar, cinnamon, butter. It sounds great. All right, we got to go to the task at hand. There is a little bit of a sweet, there's a little bit of a sweet topic we can talk about because we're going to discuss the Big Ten. 15 days after James Franklin and Penn State was in overtime against Oregon and hosted College Game Day, James Franklin was fired by Penn State. The athletic department there will owe him about $50 million worth of a buyout. Shocking transformation from a team that was, they were a trendy national championship pick, and now they're 3-3, lost season, head coach gone, quarterback out for the year.
And just think about this in context. You mentioned it at the start of the season. In some of the polls, they were one. Yeah. Most of them, they were 2 or 3. And then they're one play away from winning at home in a whiteout against Oregon, and 2 weeks later, they no longer have a head coach. They've got an interim head coach, but James Franklin is now unemployed. And the one thing that saves a little bit for Penn State, yes, it's a $50 million buyout, but he is required to seek future employment. And whether that is as a head coach somewhere or broadcasting, and we know he likes to run his mouth, so maybe that's the path that he goes. But it's just they'll have to pay the difference. So if it's less than I think it was $8 million that he's going to make every year, hey, whatever school, whatever network is going to pay him, they'll make up the difference. So it's a $50 million buyout, but he still is employable. And if there's a number of schools that would be happy to have James Franklin in the Big Ten or even in the SEC.
James Franklin would be a great broadcaster. He would be very, very good in that regard. And he will be at the top of many lists. You look at already a few of the openings that are out there. Yeah. I think he'd be a really intriguing fit at several of them. And we can probably prognosticate a few others that will likely be open in a month or 2 months. Interesting stuff. On the flip side, road teams go 6-3 last week in the Big Ten. The biggest being the Indiana Hoosiers, probably the biggest win in school history, going to Autzen Stadium, knocking off previously unbeaten Oregon 30-20. They were, I think, more than a touchdown underdog when that game got going. An incredible win for an Indiana team that last year, I think there were some people wondering about the schedule, understandably so. IU took advantage of it for the most part. This year, they've got a tougher schedule, yet they're, I think, a couple of tiers better than they were last season.
They are. And when you think about what Kirk Cignetti has done since he's been in Bloomington, it's very impressive. And everyone was pointing to a couple of games this year. It was the Illinois matchup, and they certainly made a statement in that one. It was, it was some of the games that they've hosted, but this one on the road, could they go out to the West Coast and take on Oregon? That was a team, like Penn State. A lot of people had thought going into this week they were the favorite to win the national championship. Now all of a sudden, I don't know that this win puts Indiana in the driver's seat for winning a national championship, but certainly in a driver's seat for winning a Big Ten championship, which then is the prelude to, hey, next step is national title contender they are certainly in that conversation. I don't know that we ever thought that we would live long enough, and I'm not there yet, to see Indiana win a national title, but it's certainly on the table. What he has done through the transfer portal, through his own coaching, and his ability to get guys to play at a high level is remarkable in Bloomington.
It's one of the great coaching jobs in college football history, in my opinion. Here's the rest of their schedule. This weekend, they host Michigan State, then host UCLA, go to Maryland, go to Penn State, a game that we thought was going to be a real challenge. Now, I mean, Indiana's probably going to be a double-digit favorite on the road there at least.
And think about this. That may be a trap game for Indiana. Just think about what that sounds like. But Indiana going to Happy Valley as a possible trap game.
But here's the reality. They just don't have any true difficult opponents the rest of the way. The next week is at home against Wisconsin. They're going to be playing out the string. Then they get a bye week before going to Purdue. And, Purdue's in year one of the Barry Odom era. They're building something there, but it's going to take a while. Well, it normally does, except for with Curt Cignetti at Indiana. I mean, they are going to be probably double-digit favorites in every game the rest of the season. I mean, they are more likely than not to be 12-0, which is just unfathomable.
It is. And the reason I call that a trap game, it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, thinking that Indiana going there would be the one that would be, trying to avoid the trap game. Yeah. But you do have a lot of tremendous athletes there. Drew Aller is no longer going to be the starting quarterback. He's out for the season with some type of ankle injury. You still have a couple of running backs that are high power. And those players went there because they got a lot of pride in what they do. They don't want to be that team at Penn State that just loses out after losing that one game. So that's going to be the one game that might save their season, even though it's not going to matter in anything that they're going to do in the postseason. But if they're a team that could knock off Indiana, now all of a sudden, hey, they saved a little bit of face, a little bit of pride.
Maybe there'll be a little Uno reverse of what happened in February in basketball. Dusty May went to Indiana, got a nice round of applause. Mike Woodson announces his resignation at the end of the year. Indiana fans hoping for Dusty May, and then Dusty got an extension here at Michigan shortly thereafter. I'm guessing Penn State fans might give Curt Cignetti quite a round of applause in that game, and maybe Indiana will then follow that Michigan playbook with Dusty. It'll be interesting. Other takeaways of note: Ohio State wins at Illinois. Never really much of a debate in that one. Nebraska, a comeback win at Maryland. The Huskers are 5-1. Matt Rule's name getting thrown around because of his many connections to Penn State, playing there, his relationship with their AD, all of that. Also, the struggles continue for two future Indiana opponents, Wisconsin and Michigan State. Badgers get blanked at Iowa, and Michigan State loses at home 38-13 to UCLA. Other thoughts from last week?
I mean, it's just the kind of the dismantling of Wisconsin. It's sad to see. We saw them here firsthand. And defensively, they seem like a team that could stop, some teams. But to give up 37, not to score anything at Iowa, and then in regards to Michigan State, a lot of conversation swirling about their leadership as well. And UCLA, starting the season, the first 4 games, everybody thought that this was going to be another pushover. Now, under new leadership and with new play caller, they've won 2 big games.
Sure.
And I'm not going to sit there and say a win over Michigan State is a huge win, but it is for where UCLA is in their program, and it's on the road. Their game was never in doubt either.
No, we will not play the UCLA schedule game, but they maybe they can go bowling. We shall see. This week, fun one on Friday, Nebraska at Minnesota. Both those teams 2-1 in the league. The 3 contenders, all heavy favorites. Buckeyes are at Wisconsin. Indiana, as mentioned, hosts Michigan State. Oregon is at Rutgers. And then USC at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's playoff hopes on the line. USC's playoff hopes probably on the line. Thoughts of anything coming up this week?
Well, I mean, the USC Notre Dame game is going to be a lot of fun simply because it's a rivalry. And there is finally, it's been a number of years where it's kind of been, who really cares about this game? Now, all of a sudden, with USC beating Michigan and where they are is a one-loss team, where Notre Dame is in regards to they lost a couple of games early. It's a must-win out, and they must win definitively in a lot of these games. there's some intrigue and some interest in that game.
All right, number 7 on our 7 from 77. Some of the national storylines starting in the SEC. Texas handing Oklahoma its first loss. John Mateer didn't look 100%, and his performance was certainly a struggle. 23-6 that final. Other SEC contenders get the wins. Ole Miss just a 3-point victory over now 500 Washington State. Texas A&M 6-0, a road win in the Swamp, and Alabama goes to Missouri, ends the Tigers' 6-game homestand, that's a baseball phrase, not a football phrase, but that literally was their 6th straight home game, 27-24. Georgia won at Auburn. LSU knocked off South Carolina, both 20-10. Tennessee ekes past Arkansas. I think what's unique about the SEC conversation is when we discuss the Big Ten, obviously you've got Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon as kind of the current tier 1, if you will. And we're kind of wondering, Michigan, can they hang around the playoff hunt? USC, obviously now they're more apt to be in the conversation. Illinois, they're probably out of it, but we'll see how things go. The depth, at least early, there'll be some battle of attrition, and we'll talk about a few of those games in a moment, but the SEC right now has more of those teams that I think their fans are expecting a playoff appearance, even if all of them won't get there.
Oh, sure, and just think about what Alabama's gone through. I mean, everybody wanted, Kalen DeBoer a bus ticket out of town after they lost to Florida State. Now they're one of the favorites maybe to even win the SEC, let alone a national championship. And when you look at their schedule moving forward, I know they got Tennessee, I think it's this weekend. All their ranked opponents that are in the SEC are all going to be played at home. They've got 3 of them coming up, but I forget what the other 2 are, but Tennessee this week, and then the other 2 ranked opponents, they're all going to be played in Tuscaloosa. So things are setting up well for them to be a playoff team, play for an SEC championship. And then everybody else, you're trying to figure out, like, who is Ole Miss for real? And, a lot riding on this week's game. There's some payback maybe, running down that game. So it'll be interesting. And if you're just a college football fan, this is going to be a great slate of games this weekend.
100%. You mentioned those home games. Tennessee this weekend, they host Oklahoma and LSU in the month of November at home as well. Sneaky road games at South Carolina, and then, of course, the Iron Bowl against Auburn. But, Alabama's week 1 to now, there's been a big flip there. Other notable games in the SEC this week, LSU at Vandy, as we all expected, a couple of 5-1 teams there battling in Nashville. Also, unbeaten Ole Miss, a touchdown underdog at 5-1 Georgia. Interesting stuff there. Otherwise, Big 12, Texas Tech takes care of Kansas. BYU wins in double overtime against Arizona. Those are the 2 unbeatens left in the Big 12. And hey, we all know about Miami, the Canes, number 2 in the nation. They actually have both their bye weeks already done. They were off again this past week. The other unbeaten in the ACC, the Yellow Jackets of Georgia Tech obliterate Virginia Tech last week. Thoughts on everything else going on the college football playoff front, including, again, we're talking, there's the typical SEC contenders, but we're talking Georgia Tech, we're talking BYU, we're talking Texas Tech. There's some interesting flavor there.
Yeah, BYU and Texas Tech will actually play during the regular season. Georgia Tech and Miami don't. So you may actually have the 2 best teams in that conference reach, with undefeated records in the conference, and then play in the ACC championship game. So I think that would be interesting. It would be fun. And I'm just not sure yet what to make of the Big 12, because we don't know that much about. I mean, Texas Tech, nobody has spent more money on their roster than Texas Tech, and they're getting their money's worth to this point. BYU goes into the season, their quarterback steps away and transfers because of some off-the-field issues, and then they put in a young player, and now they're right there as well. So excitement around college football.
A big one in the Big 12 this week. One of the most bitter rivalries in college football. This is a sneaky one.
Holy war.
Utah at BYU. I'll tell you, of all the rivalry games, obviously there's a few that we'll never be able to attend because they come in the very last week of the season. This one doesn't. Maybe a top 5 game that I'd like to go see is Utah at BYU or BYU Utah. It is fierce.
Yeah, and I'd like to go see it at BYU because we've been to Utah and seen it. It's a beautiful environment, and I'd like to be able to go to, what is it, Provo is where they are. Yep. I'd like to go see it there as well. But yeah, there will be some haymakers thrown in that one.
Yes, and also on the field. All right, so we're going to have the transition here. On the audio side, though, I do want you to tee up the conversation with punter Hudson Hollenbeck. Obviously, on the field, a bit of a struggle for him last week, but this is a special young man. It is a special week coming up here for Michigan football, the first block cancer game. Among other aspects, there will be signs for you to get, courtesy of Michigan Medicine Rogel Cancer Center. You've seen it, I'm sure, at the World Series, some NFL events where you can hold up a sign, you can write in the name of someone who is actively battling, has battled cancer. I encourage you to do so. There'll be a special celebration coming up during the end of the first quarter break on Saturday for the Michigan-Washington game. And Hudson Hollenbeck, unfortunately, has been impacted as much as you can be by cancer in his family.
Yeah, I mean, his mother passed away a few years ago from cancer, and Hudson Hollenbeck, we go through what it was like for him as a child of somebody that was battling cancer, and he talks a lot about that experience, why he is doing what he's doing, and if you want to go to U of M, MGO Blue.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, forgot our website, mgoblue.com. And there you can download your card for blood cancer, but you can also Google punt cancer. And that's where you can find all of the information that Hudson Hollenbeck has on what he is doing to raise fund for lung cancer, the type of cancer that his mother passed from. And so make sure you listen to the audio side. He's going to share a lot more detail and a lot more of his experience and why he is on the mission that he's on.
So on the audio side, enjoyed this conversation with punter Hudson Hollenbeck. On the video side, we'll catch up with Tony Castricone, the outstanding play-by-play voice of the Huskies momentarily. A couple comments first. Dakota Kid weighing in, really need someone to be vocal, in-your-face leadership, whether a captain or not. Zeke, Jimmy, Gio, Bryce Underwood talked about taking on more of a vocal leadership role. To your point earlier, leader game, captain game.
It is, but so what you run the risk of is guys that are going to try and be vocal leaders, but it doesn't show up on Saturdays, or it doesn't show up every day at practice. It's not every guy can be a vocal leader. A guy that I would look to that's not typically vocal is Max Bredesen. That's a guy, two-time captain, has to go out there. Ernie Hausman, again, not much that he's going to say on a regular basis, but this is where, when you don't say a lot, but you always show leadership and guys are following you, this is a week where your words will matter. They will, the weight that they carry will carry more this week than ever before. So I do look for those guys. It doesn't have to be shouting and screaming, but it's time to step up and say something and do something.
Also, thanks to Patrick, said he was unable to watch the game on Saturday, but tuned into our coverage. So, Patrick, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate you being locked in on Saturday. We also appreciate a top 10 cleanest roommate in my life, Tony Castricone, joining us here on the show, the outstanding play-by-play voice of Washington. Inside the radio booth there, Bob Rondo radio booth, that's the greatest setting, Washington says. It is very good. We loved the trip last year outside of the result. Tony, what's going on, my man?
Hey, great to see you again. And you are top 20 cleanest roommate in the history of my life, and I've had about like 3 or 4. So
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was great to see you. We'll see you on Saturday. Take care. So tell us about the Washington Huskies, 5-1 after a complete overall. Normally when you see a team, in a postseason game and then the next year you recognize more than the kicker, Grady Gross, but that was kind of the scenario last season when we came out to Seattle. But year 2, I mean, the talent is certainly evident on both sides of the ball. There's some big-time players on offense. How would you grade out this second year of the Jedd Fisch era?
I think it's gone about as well as could be expected, and even as well as could be hoped at this point. I mean, I think, it's really difficult to be in the situation that Washington was in 18 months ago, losing its head coach just on the heels of the national championship game, of course. And then, like Jedd came into a situation, it was one of the most kind of awkward introductory press conferences, because you've been to some of these before where they're very celebratory and stuff. And Jedd walked into a room like of a program that just lost the national championship game the week earlier, and then lost a coach that everybody was really fond of. And I felt bad for Jedd, because it's like, this is the biggest opportunity of his life. And he walked into a room where the energy was just a little bit off, but he put his head down and went to work and did an amazing job stabilizing the program. I mean, last year could have gone a lot worse. And they won every home game, including that big game against Michigan. And They had some close calls on the road. I think, 6-6 is about what that program was last year. And I think in some ways it's good that it ended up 6-6 and maybe not a little bit better, because I think the expectations for this year were appropriate. They're looking to take a step this year. And if a couple close games go their way this year, maybe can sneak into the college football playoff picture. And I said going into the year, like, there's the opportunity, looking at the way the schedule laid out, that they could start 5-1. Winning at home against Ohio State was going to be tough in year 2 of this rebuild because they're just not quite there in the trenches yet. But opportunity to be 5-1 and go into a crucial 3-game stretch that can make or break your season. And that 3-game stretch starts now: at Michigan, home against Illinois, at Wisconsin. I don't think we expected Wisconsin to be maybe as down as they've appeared to be so far, but just look at UCLA. I think in this league, anybody can make an adjustment, and then boom, they're a whole different team. So it is, we're seeing in this Big Ten conference a parity, the likes of which I don't think we've ever seen before. It's starting to look more and more like the NFL, with lower possession games, closer games. You could win or lose any week. There's just tons of talent everywhere. And for Washington to be 5-1 in a league like that in the second year of a rebuild, I think is phenomenal.
Well, and one of the reasons that they're 5-1, there's a number of different reasons, and we'll get to the transfers and some of the impact that they've had. But DeMond, your quarterback, and especially coming off the game that he had against Rutgers, where, hey, it's 402 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns. It's 136 on the ground, another 2 touchdowns. What is it that what's the best thing that he does when he's on the field?
That's a hard thing to answer, because I think he kind of does it all, which is what you're seeing. And now the question is, can he do it all more consistently? Because I think, again, just a 19-year-old kid, a true sophomore, but someone who's got the stature, the athleticism, the leadership, and the playmaking ability of truly, like, a Kyler Murray is not an inappropriate comparison. I think that Jed Fish sees him as the first quarterback he's ever coached that could win a Heisman Trophy. And, this is a guy that just, like, shows unbelievable athleticism, his foot in the ground on a plant, and his change of direction. Well, let's just say this: of all the great running backs in America, of which there are many, there's one player in college football that has 10 rushes of 20-plus yards this year, and that's DeMond Williams, right? And then you add on to that an exceptional downfield thrower who has an explosive arm but an accurate arm, a guy that has the rare lethal combination of being top 5 in the nation in completion percentage plus top 5 in the nation in yards per attempt. You normally don't see those two things together. And then he's an unbelievable runner, takes great care of the football. I think the next step in his evolution is just understand when to get down a little sooner. Don't risk getting hurt. Also understand when to get rid of the football, and don't take as many sacks, of which Washington's taken a handful this year. But, we're talking, again, a 19-year-old kid playing in what is going to be his this will be his 9th college football start. It's pretty phenomenal that he's at the place he's at.
Jonah Coleman, a running back, we shared a few numbers comparing him to Justice Haynes. And Sharon Moore from Michigan was saying Haynes should be a Heisman in the Heisman conversation going into last week.
Sure.
Jonah Coleman, 15 of his 96 carries have gone for 10 or more yards. Haynes is 15 of 95. And Justice Haynes has broken 20 tackles. Jonah Coleman, 21. And this kind of similar to Michigan, some shuffling around, some injuries on the offensive line. Take us through what you've seen from Coleman in that running game.
Yeah, I thought CBS actually hit the nail on the head earlier this week when they brought out their midseason All-American team. And on the first team, Justice Haynes was the first team running back All-American, and Jonah Coleman was first team all-purpose, because Coleman is a kick returner. He's caught 20 passes out of the backfield. He is dangerous in the check down game. He's broken several of those for explosive plays as well. We're just talking about a guy that's a 4th-year running back that is like the team leader. Jed Fish called him the culture leader. He said the most important transfer he got in his 2 years at Washington was getting Jonah to come with him from Arizona, because that's who brought the culture from Tucson up to Seattle. And a guy that's just a true leader. His teammates love him. I think the offensive line loves him. I just think that he is kind of one of those heart and soul guys. And it's really a lethal 1-2 combination. Literally, number one, Jonah Coleman, number two, Damon Williams. I mean, it's been a really fun combo to see this year. You know, they had a hard time shaking loose against Ohio State. I think a lot of teams have. But outside of that, it's just really made for a really fun offense to follow.
You talk about a fun offense, and I mean, we talked about the quarterback, the running back, now the receivers, where Denzel Boston, all right, we know a lot about him. He's been there, and he's developed, and he's a tremendous receiver. But you've got two freshmen in Desmond Roebuck and Raiden Vines-Bright. What have you seen from both of those freshmen, and how exciting is it, not just now, because we're concerned about this weekend's matchup, but the fact that you've got that talent at quarterback that is a sophomore and two freshmen that are major producers in great production in your offense?
It really makes you excited for the future if, you know, in this world of college football where everything changes and the transfer portal is constantly open and everything, you just hope you can hold on to them, you know? It's like having a few really good first dates and you get really excited about like, okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but like, man, you know, a year or two from now, things could be looking pretty good. And I think that Vines-Bright and Des Roebuck, what they both have is a maturity. They're very poised. The moment hasn't been too big for them. Both of them played well against Ohio State, national TV, number one team in the country in town. These guys were in high school last year. But then, and I know you guys have a great true freshman receiver yourselves, but I think it's a combination of great speed, really good hands, and the ability to do more than just run routes. But both are really good blockers. I think Raiden Vines-Bright had a block that sprung Jonah Coleman for the first touchdown of the season. Coleman wouldn't have got the touchdown if Vines-Bright had that block on the outside. Roebuck's exceptional in that part of the game as well. So, you know, we're talking about a couple of young bucks, guys that are 18 years old, high schoolers a year ago, and for them to be at where they're at right now. Hey, Jed has said, like, as we're trying to build this thing out, he can't afford not to put the best players on the field. And he proved it at Arizona, he's proven it now at Washington. He's willing to play freshmen. We had a freshman left guard, John Mills, who I think has made some midseason freshman All-American lists that he's a little bit shaken up right now. We don't know whether or not he's going to go this weekend. But then there's true freshmen on the other side of the ball that are playing too. True freshmen have had a huge impact on this Washington 5-1 start. Roebuck and Vines-Bright are two of them.
A few more questions here for Washington's play-by-play voice, Tony Castricone. Defensively, 19 points for Rutgers last week, yet 493 yards. There was a little bit of that similarity with Ohio State, not to that degree. The score wasn't large from Ohio State, but they had some sustained drives. There weren't a lot of possessions in that game. How would you describe this Washington defense? Is a bend but don't break type of philosophy a fair way to assess them?
You know, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of that so far. I think you're right, and you're onto something. The Ohio State game was really different in that it was such an extremely fast, low possession game. I mean, we're talking under 3 hours. I think outside of the final kneel down, Ohio State only truly had 6 full possessions in the game, and they scored on the final 4 of them. So that was a little bit of an anomaly where they were really able to control the clock. And I think they wanted to do that to benefit a freshman quarterback making his first road start. I think when you're looking at Rutgers last weekend, gave up that early touchdown drive in a flash, 4 plays, 75 yards right out the gate. But after that, you know, did a good job of Rutgers has a pretty explosive offense. Mm-hmm. And I think that bend but don't break is a great analogy for that game. 6 trips into the red zone, only 1 touchdown allowed. And I think where they're really trying to take the next step is stopping the run. There are some interesting things. I'd be interested to dive into success rate defensively for Washington's defense because they look good against the run, 8th in the country in yards allowed. But oddly, Washington is 1st in the country in fewest rushing attempts against, right? So yards per carry is solid, but it's not quite as elite as 8th in the country would look in rushing defense. And so they're going to have to stop the run. Ryan Walters in his first year as a coordinator, we all know his name and his pedigree on that side of the ball. But I think they've experimented with some 5 down fronts, 4 down fronts. You know, they've gone 3 safeties at times, 3 corners at times. it'll be interesting to see what kind of defense they dial up and how much they want to put this game in Underwood's hands. And then, of course, how much of an impact Haynes has on the game if he's able to go. But I think stopping the run is where it really has to start for Washington's defense. When they're able to do that, they're successful because the back half of their defense is full of playmakers.
You mentioned full of playmakers, and 5 of those guys defensively are transfers this year. For those, Michigan fans that, hey, we know some of the guys obviously from last year, but for the new guys that are there, a part of this Washington defense, who has really stood out to you among those transfers? Because you got some at every level, a couple of defensive tackles, a linebacker, a couple of guys in the secondary. Who stood out to you?
My favorite player on the defense is Alex McLaughlin because he doesn't look like it necessarily. 6'2", 200-pounder, a little bit wiry frame, long red hair coming out the back. But dude is just a football player. He's a safety. They play him at that strong safety position up in the box, and he is really good in stopping the run out of the secondary, but also just an incredibly active defensive player. FCS All-American at Northern Arizona, where he played 23 games, 12 TFLs, 7 sacks, 6 interceptions, 10 PBUs. He had 2 interceptions against Washington State, including a pick 6. He just is constantly making plays and has done an amazing job of coming in as an instant impact. Another transfer in the secondary is Takario Davis. He's kind of locked down that other corner opposite Ephesians Priceock. And I think one of the things that really hurt Washington's chances against Ohio State, I'm not just saying this, I think it's a different ball game if Takario Davis was able to play defensively because with his injury against UC Davis, they had to start a true freshman against Jeremiah Smith. That's difficult. And Smith had 8 catches for 81 yards. And so I think Takario Davis was all-conference a couple years ago in the Pac-12. He was all-conference in the Big 12 last year. Now can he go all-conference Big 10 and just, get the trifecta? Be interesting to see. And then Tai Uyunglele down on the defensive line is just a game wrecker. He's had 3 games in a row now where he's made impact plays on the defensive side of the ball. Deshaun Lynch has come back from injury. He's a transfer from Sacramento State who's been big the last couple of games. So those are a couple of the names that you'll really pay attention to.
Lastly, before we let you go, a lot of conversation here in Ann Arbor last week about Michigan flying out a day early to USC. That's a once-a-year thing that Michigan has to contend with. Obviously, not the case for you all. Multiple trips of 2 or 3 time zones over the course of the conference season. Do you feel like Washington has figured out the best possible solution? And how does a noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time kick impact things?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. I think the travel's a little bit overblown. And, I think if I'm being honest, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Washington football, but I roll my eyes a little bit every time I hear a Midwest team complain about the travel because it's just like, well, even when we were in the Pac-12, it was a full 3-hour flight down to Tucson or Tempe, right? It's just a little bit different out here where things are more spread out. And so we're used to the travel. The team plane is large and comfortable. I'm in row 46, and when I arrive, there are 3,000 calories in a plastic baggie waiting for me, so they've got it down. I don't think anybody's suffering in these giant metal tubes, but what I will say is I think it's unfortunate that a Michigan State fan base can't, like a kid who's fallen in love with Michigan State football, he can't stay up to watch an 11 p.m. kickoff at USC. I just don't think that's necessary. And I don't think it's necessary that our staff, our IT guys and our everybody, our equipment staff, that they're going to have to get up at 2:30 a.m. Pacific time on Saturday to get everything set in the big house. I don't think that's necessary. It's exciting for us to be on the big noon kickoff, the big 9 a.m. kickoff for us out west. But, I just think there's so much inventory for the TV networks. This isn't the NFL where it's like once you get rid of the Monday night game and the Sunday night game and the Thursday night game, and then you got the teams on the bye week, we only got 10 games to choose from. There's so many teams playing that I think you can avoid the West Coast teams playing at 9A, the East Coast teams playing at 11P. But that's just me. I think if there was one thing about travel that I would change, it would just be a rule around that.
Yeah, totally get it. Well, Tony, looking forward to seeing you here this weekend. Always appreciate the time, and safe travels out here.
Looking forward to it, guys. Love this new Washington. We've played Michigan more times in the last 5 years than we've played Arizona State and Cal and Stanford. Like it's a bizarre new rivalry, but it's an awesome rivalry. It is a total throwback. Two great institutions. Excited to see you guys once again.
No doubt. Appreciate you, buddy.
Go Dogs.
There is Tony Castricone. Always enjoy catching up with him. Before we get out of here, did get a good question from Cut from a Different Cloth. John, what kind of leader were you when you played at Michigan? How did you go about trying to lead your peers? Two-time captain, obviously one season that undefeated, national champions. Another one where you guys had some real adversity right out of the gates.
And that's why I go to, like there's different timing for everything. And in the 97 season, that was more of a, hey, I do my work and I show leadership by my actions. And it was easy because we had Brian Greasy, we had Ben Huff, Sweat. We had a number of different guys that even though they weren't elected captain, were leading in their own ways. Zach Adamy, one of them as well. So then you fast forward to the next year and we didn't have as many veteran guys. And Backus and Hutch were all a year older, and they were taking on more of a leadership role. But that's where Joaquin and I, Fazell, who was the captain that year along with me, we needed to put on more of and go with more of a vocal leadership, especially when you lose the first two games. So there's no one right way to do it. And I mentioned Max and Ernie as guys that maybe needed to be a little bit more vocal this week. It's not everybody's style. Not everybody's comfortable doing that. They're elected captain because of what they've done to this point. Now it's their time to be consistent and show that leadership through consistent practice, through consistent meeting, through consistent preparation, and then obviously consistent performance on the games on Saturday.
I thought something interesting that Tony said was comparing things a little bit to the NFL now, where talent's so spread out. You can have a really good stretch of games, and then you run into a dud. We've seen it locally with the Lions. It was panic time after week one. Then they were probably the best team in football for 4 weeks. And then they go to Kansas City and, didn't really feel like it was their night in that situation. I'm not saying that's what it is in college football where, 9-8 or the equivalent of that in college football, 7-5, that doesn't get you in the playoffs like it can in the NFL. But I think teams are allowed to have a dud like Michigan had. It doesn't make it any easier, any better. The requirement is to bounce back emphatically. If that turns into a trend, there's real concern there. And frankly, as we talked about with Tony, as we talked about beforehand, similar quarterback in terms of high skill level, dual threat, a lot of potential. Coincidentally enough, USC had a running back like Jonah Coleman. He got hurt, and then USC still ran the football. But stud receivers, there is a significant parallel there. We got to see if Michigan can learn from it.
Yeah, there is, but the difference obviously between the NFL and the college analogy, or what the Lions are doing versus what Michigan is doing, is they've got a track record now of going out there and playing at a very high level. Even in Michigan's wins, you can look at some of the results and say, okay, yeah, you ran for over 300 yards against Central Michigan, but that was Central Michigan, and it wasn't always executed right. Some of those runs were just simply successful because you were playing against the lesser talent. So this is not a complicated game, and it doesn't have to be complicated against Washington. The better opponents, things get more complicated, but the basics are you've got to block and you've got to tackle. And right now, we're not consistent enough up front on the offensive line at blocking, whether it's the pass game or the run game. And even in those games where Nebraska, you start to run the ball a little bit more. Wisconsin, you start to run the ball a little bit more at the end of the game. You start to wear some teams down. It still doesn't mean that you've reached a certain level of consistency playing there. And defensively, the tackling issue has been something that has gone on all season long. It was highlighted in that opening drive against Wisconsin, and it was highlighted all game long against USC. The thing that I was most surprised about was getting pushed around on both sides of the line of scrimmage, but especially that defensive line. You give up that many yards rushing. Some of it is tackling. Some of it is just being disciplined in the right position at the right time and doing your 111th. We don't have enough of that right now.
All right, that'll do it for this Tuesday edition. Thanks to Tony Castricone for joining us. Thanks to all those here at our Chrysler Center studios for making it possible. Big weekend, big amount of coverage coming your way. Congrats to John Jansen a few days early with the Hall of Honor. Basketball exhibition on Friday night as well. Terry Mills and I will have that radio call. Exciting time, but it's got to come with a win on Saturday because, I mean, every game's a playoff game now. Period. Full stop. Michigan has to win.
Got to win out.
No doubt.
That's where they are.
All right. For the Hall of Honor inductee, I'm Brian Bush. Thanks for watching here. Our Tuesday live stream, we're back next week for you here on Michigan Athletics YouTube and John Jansen 77 on Twitter.